I know that you're doing well. I'm glad to see that you got out of the hole. I hear through gig that you got ways of getting vegetables and food where you're at. Everybody here seems to be stuck on flesh eaters. So I don't know whether I'll be able to get this tape to you, but I'm just sitting here thinking about you all anyway, because there ain't nothing else to do, and anywhere I go I know I'm you, and I keep coming back and forth to myself. And every day I keep on growing in my love for you. I keep on saying, I know your love for me will keep on weighing. Judgment of a judgment that you thought was up above. You remember that line, love? I was walking in the darkness, I was dreaming in my night. Up on the highway with the kings and down through the fight. I was in the ice picks, corners, and all the places you could see in your mind. From war's door I've always been. Masterminds one and thinking all. Down through ones are the sum of nuns that keep my words upon the wall. And I keep walking in my forever. And I keep living in my dream. I see you, Red. Oh, Red, how you doing, Red? You better not get too fat, girl. I know you gave up a little bit, and you kind of ate a little bit too much, but I was a blues fool on bees, jumping on schools and rule books like, how you doing, kid? You know, they kept it and where they kept it hid. I keep on with my forevers and my forever's dream. And in knowing one's all is always in the one it sees. Back through my eyes, forever broken, laying there on the floor. So I was wishing for wishing wells, and wishing wells were silver too. The silver wells of something that smells that fell down the hill with you. And you keep walking in my forever and living in my dream. Let me take my back and give it to you. My word is only my word, and my word has always been true to you. I know.
This podcast assumes that you have a general knowledge of the Tate LaBianca murders.
I'm glad to see
Sharon
that you
Tate
got out of the
Polanski,
hole.
Jay Sebring, Wojciech Frykowski, Abigail Folger, and Stephen Parent were murdered on Cielo Drive in Los Angeles on August 9, 1969. Lena and Rosemary LaBianca were slain in their Los Feliz residence the following night. Charles Manson, Charles Watson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Quenwinkle, and Leslie Van Houten were convicted of those murders. Say hello to the Goodbye Helter Skelter Podcast. Hello. Welcome to the Goodbye Helter Skelter Podcast, episode number 16. I'm excited about this. This is my first live podcast. I hope it goes well. I hope you enjoy it. Obviously, I should have unchecked loop on the music earlier, but I won't make that mistake next time. I'm glad to have you all here. This is a big thing. We're going to go for about an hour tonight. What I want to do with this first episode is bring in a guest. You all know him. He's Paul from the Paulcast. And what we're going to do is discuss some of the things that I talked about in my last episode as far as the clues we are following. First, I do want to give a thanks you to Bruce Fox, who helped me learn how to use StreamYard. It was a crash course. Learned it pretty well. Keep learning it better as I go along. But anyway, I do have some notes here. And Paul's in the waiting room. We'll get to him as soon as we can in about a second. Again, I just want to welcome everybody here and say I hope you enjoy the podcast. And what we're going to be looking at here is some of the false assumptions that people make about clues that are really irrelevant to the case. And this, again, I say is a follow-up of the podcast I did, number 15, which was about the steak knives and the cut wire from Jay Sebring's house. So we're going to try to get to the bottom of that. And Paul, I believe you're here, are you not? And I'm going to bring you in right here. Sure
Hey,
enough.
George.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you betcha.
Okay. So you got the flavor I want to do tonight?
Yep. Yeah, you bet. And it's funny too, because now that I've watched your show, what I really like about your show and stuff like that is it makes me double check my work. And so there's a couple of different things that I did looking into it, and now I'm split down the middle. So this is going to be interesting.
Yeah, you looked up something I didn't. Yeah, I did get a tip on the electrician, and we'll talk about that later. But you thought to investigate that and ask some people about what he was saying was true, and that's a good avenue to go when you're questioning. Look at everything and don't accept anything as being true. It might be true, but it could just as easily be false. So
right.
I did notes here that I got from your. Unless you would rather start with your conclusions, or because I guess most people here saw my podcast. If they don't know what I'm talking about. There was a set of steak knives that were found and turned into the police. So I've got some. If you don't mind, I can show you some of this stuff.
You bet.
Yeah, I've got the report about the steak knives here. Basically found at. They say Angelo and Sunnyvale by Harvey. 2 days after the murders, a set of steak knives found in the bushes going the back way out of Cielo Drive. And Paul was turned on to this tip by a poster to his site who said basically that was Roman and Sharon's wedding steak knives, and that they were out. And if so, then that meant that the killers left from a different route than we're used to them going. Basically, I can show you that too.
Right. And we drove that when we were in LA.
Really complicated route. Now you're looking at that. Angelo Drive looks pretty, you can see leaving Cielo Drive going down to Benedict Canyon and turning south before you got there and taking some twisty roads back to the intersection of Sunbrook and Angelo and then driving all the way up. Was that a pretty twisty drive that you took there? It looks pretty bad.
No, that map actually makes it look a lot more complicated than it was. It took no time at all to go that way. The thing that's interesting is there's two sides of Cielo Drive. So you can like when you're going up to it, you can come out either which way. But the way that way we drove, and it was pretty pretty much as straightforward as driving down Benedict Canyon. It popped you right out, as you can see, pretty close to Portola Drive, which is actually right after Jay Sebring's Road, Easton. Right. And I remember you saying on the podcast that was a tough road to see. I didn't see it that way. It was as easy to see as Portola.
Okay, let me ask you a question, because I asked you before you went down to LA if you could take a video of driving up Benedict Canyon at night. Did you get a chance to do that, or did you drive there in the daytime?
We drove there in the daytime, and we went back past it in the evening, but I totally biffed on taking a video of it in the evening. So I took one during the day. But it was like when I was looking at like lamp posts and everything, there wasn't one right above Portola or anything. It was all, they were all pretty much the same.
Right. There's not one there. I'm showing the turnoff right now, Benedict Canyon, turning. Portola's going up on the left side of your screen. This is also looking. Here's a map showing the way the trees are down around the corner of Easton and Benedict Canyon. And also the road turns there to the right just as you pass Easton. So I guess there was no light there. It seems to me that would be a hard street to see if you had just left a scene of killing 5 people and you were changing your clothes. It wouldn't be the easiest street to see. Whereas Portola is quite easy. There was a light and everything else. So, I mean, and if you're going to get into this contention later that they had been there the night before, that makes it even less believable to me that they wouldn't see it on the night, Easton.
Right. On that thought, your thought there about them going, like, leaving a crime scene.
Mm-hmm.
Portola is so close to Cielo
Mm-hmm.
that it's like, that is the last place for me if I'm trying to think like a speeded out
Mm-hmm.
person who's just murdered people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that I would have stopped in a place A, as conspicuous, and
Mm-hmm.
B, as close to the murder scene. If they did take, like, either which way, if they took Benedict Canyon Drive or Angelo, there were ample places to stop each place, and Portola is just so close. Like, it would take less time to walk from that house on Portola to
Right.
Sebring's house on Easton than it
Right.
did from them to walk from the bottom of Cielo to the top of Cielo.
Right, right there. That's walking from not quite to the end of Easton, because I didn't have the address, but
it's right. It's
that's
actually
pretty much distance there.
if
Here's the walking distance going down Cielo, so it is pretty close.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is too, there was two ways to get into Jay Sebring's place. The actual driveway itself was up and around the back, the top of Easton, and then, but you can see the house, and it's now, I guess it's a part of the same property, just right down, just right a little bit up the road on Easton, and you could just walk through that yard and get right there. And so I'm guessing, like, trespassing wasn't big on their list of faux pas to do if they were going to cut through.
Well, yeah, but you talk about not thinking clearly, or thinking clearly rather. That's a big issue here. Is how clearly were these people thinking? And I think the MF blog did a test of how long it took to change the clothing, and they said it took like a minute and a half. So I don't know where that would get you on Benedict Canyon, but I personally, this is my own opinion. I could see doing that and saying, we better pull over, get on a side street, and pulling in and seeing Weber's hose, which he said was quite visible from the street. So
sorry.
Yeah, well, they went up Portola and turned around and came back down. So it's hard to say what a particular person would have noticed that you didn't notice. I think it's kind of, maybe the question is it unreasonable to think that they did that? Is it that unreasonable to think that they did that?
For me, it seems too, too much of a coincidence. You know what I mean? Like, when I'm trying to think of that sort of stuff, either rationally or irrationally, every house on Portola had a hose bib on the front of it, right? So everyone had a hose visibly right out front, and I think a bunch of those houses were there because they're all very old houses. It's an older area. And then it was so close to the Sebring place. And the problem with what Greenwald said, I've got his information, and I'm going to reach out to him, which is hilarious. But I'm going to
hear about that.
Yeah.
I might get you some more, since you haven't done it already.
Yeah, I'd love to have some questions. The thing I really want is, because, like you'd said, I reached out to some electrician friends of mine, because I was like, so look, this is what the guy says happened, and I sent them the video of him talking, and they haven't watched the video yet, but in my layman's terms, them talking to me, they were like, I don't see how the lights would have come on. Now, the problem with what he said is half of it is plausible and half of it is, and a bit of it is provable, and then some of it it's a bit off, and so it's a tough one to pinpoint until there's more information on it. Because
what do you think is provable about Greenwald's statements?
Well, it's backed up that he came to get the suit by Eamon Russell, right? The butler, as well as they wrote down that the cops wrote down that he was there, so they were there the day that he came, and they also talked to him after. So those are things that are like provable as far as it goes. And then the other thing
Well, no,
is
that's much. It's saying that proving that he went to get the suit isn't saying much. I don't think that's a dispute whether he got the suit or not.
right, but what I'm saying, that's where I'm like, some of it's provable, some of it's hearsay, some of it's this. But the thing with the actual wire itself, one thing that I thought was interesting was when you were talking about it being written down on the Cielo report, the Sebring's electric wire or whatever.
Right.
So that would have had to have been cut at his house, because I don't think that he would have brought a wire to Cielo that had his name on it or anything like that. So how else would they have put together that that's a wire to do with Jay Sebring? And they never said that it was tied around him or anything like that. And so that's the black rubber. They call it electric wire cord, but remember, those are cops too, right? They're not super up on anything.
Well, that's an interesting point to bring up, because it says one black rubber electric wire cord Sebring home, and you think, well, gee, even though the property report, when you look at the whole thing, it does say that the thing was picked up at Sebring's house. And also Amos Russell said that there weren't any police over there in the 3 days between the murders and the day that he was being interviewed, except the Greenwald picking up the suit, Sebring's business partner, and his receptionist, which is a whole nother avenue of
yeah,
to say the least. But so yeah, I'm thinking, but you talk about the police report, and I don't mean to get down on them too much, but you look at the police report for the steak knives, and they said that the knives were found at Angelo and Sunnyvale Street instead of Sunbrook. So that's completely wrong. There were some issues that Greenwald had with the police report that they filed on his interrogation with them. He's sensitive about being called a TV repairman, apparently.
Yeah.
And he disputed the day that he said that. Anyway, he said there were some problems with that police report too. So it is possible that Granado rode home, and maybe he got it out of Sebring's car. And I'm just saying possibility, because any evidence that any people went over to Sebring's house to pick up the wire. The report says it was retrieved at Cielo. And Russell says there weren't any police over there on that day looking for evidence. So that's one possibility. The problem with the notation about the wire completely is that, honestly, the only conclusion I can come to is that I don't know what it means. And sometimes you get to that point and you say, well, I can't really make a conclusion about it one way or another. Granado was the same guy. He was very busy that day, taking all the blood samples and everything. And he's the one that's got the blood samples of the front door that indicate Sharon Tate was hung upside down, later in the evening or something. So who knows? What a scene. They might have been overwhelmed, making mistakes. We don't know. But that's the only thing I say. I don't know. I wouldn't say, well, it had to have come from Sebring's home because it says so. We just don't know. Granado, what's his character like? Was he
sure on that line of thought? That's where everybody's anything anybody said has to be thrown into question. Like I remember you saying on your video, really like look at the books by Susan Atkins and Tex Watson and all that stuff, which I agree as well. But I also think that those guys definitely have lied about a bunch of stuff. Susan Atkins changed her story from this to that to the next thing. And so all of that stuff is also in flux. There's any sort of anything to do with this case, it seems, can be interpreted a bunch of different ways, and it seems it's tough to leave it open to all these possibilities.
They have changed the stories a lot, but one thing I think they stayed consistent on is I know that Susan Atkins, Charles Watson, and Linda Kasabian all testified that they just changed the clothes, washed up at Rudolph Weber's, dumped the clothes, dumped the gun, and went back. So they do say a lot of different things regarding that, but in that instance, they're all saying the same thing. The only thing I can think of is that's different is during their grand jury testimony, Susan Atkins says they dumped the clothing and then they went to the hose, which would have them driving around in circles. So, there's a mistake right there. So,
Then there's also the reasons for doing it, right? Like Susan Atkins said that they had burned Linda Kasabian on some drugs up at Cielo Drive, which shows premeditation from that sort of thing. But she also says, helter skelter, and she also says this, that, and the next thing. So when it comes to almost anybody in this, what they say, it's almost impossible to pin any of it down, even if their stories connect every once in a while, right? It's like this thing's been compressed so much and it's been made so linear.
Right. That's what you have to do, though, then, is to take the statements that are odd or off and try to find any kind of evidence that would corroborate them. I mean, if Susan Atkins says that Linda says they got burned on a bunch of drugs, apparently Linda's never testified to that, or Bugliosi would have probably said something about it at some point.
The truth is as follows, right?
Yeah. So you do have to try to corroborate everybody's statement with what you know is true, or can kind of assume is true. I know you on your show once you chewed me out for saying Hatami, the photographer, wasn't reliable because he said that Reed Whitson called him from the Tate bedroom.
Did I? Oh man, I don't even know about Reed Whitson.
I downloaded it. I'll bring it back later and show everybody. Yeah. Something like that. You don't have to corroborate it. I mean, the guy was not in the Tate living room at 8:30 in the morning. I don't care what Tommy says, period, whether he called him or not. So some stuff you can toss out right away.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to ask you on that line of thinking, like corroborating statements and evidence and stuff like that. So I've always found it really curious that so much stuff was happening with drugs and drug dealing. Then that it seems like far-fetched that the Cielo thing wouldn't have had to do with drug dealing, considering the two murders that happened before had to do with drug burns, and then the statement from Sebring's secretary saying that he was mad about being burned on.
I had a question about that. You said 2 murders before. You talking?
The shooting and the murder. Hinman and lots of Papa.
Yeah. Well, the only answer I have to that is that so many people in all those crowds were doing drugs. I mean, I knew one of Johnny Wad's coke dealers. That doesn't mean I had anything to do with the Wonderland murders.
No, sure, but it's a little more straightforward than that. It doesn't seem quite as far-fetched, considering they were all a part of the same group. There was like multiple people who thought it was about drug dealing, people that were close to the Tates and everybody, and on the other side of things.
Investigated that angle very thoroughly.
Pardon?
The police investigated that angle very thoroughly from the information they got from Witold K about, Harrigan and those people, picked Austin, Tom.
But like you said, that they were stretched real thin. They don't know exactly. They weren't writing everything down properly. And the thing is, with what happened with Weinstein and all that sort of stuff, they'll cover it up till they can't. Right. So Hollywood was getting a lot of money from that area, as far as and that kind of busted it open and showed that there was more going on there than just like the happy people up the hill.
Well, maybe I have a different experience than you. I just don't feel it like that,
that's fair. I was just kind of curious your thoughts on it because of the amount of people talking about how there was so much drugs going on, and how his business partner thought it was about drugs when it first happened. So I was just curious.
That could easily be. I mean, just as a general motive to throw out there that it could be drug related, but then you have to kind of, I think, flesh that out quite a bit with details: who, when, what, what was the deal, where was it, you hear about people saying, well, everybody knew they were going up there to deliver drugs. Well, who knew? Talk to these people. Who's saying what? There's a lot. The only problem with a thing like that is, to me, there's so many unanswered questions that if I had answers to all the questions, I could maybe say, yeah, okay. But just to kind of say vaguely, well, uh, Tex and Linda got burned for this and, went back and did whatever. And, there has to be a little more meat on it for me, and I've accepted, I think everybody knows the version of crimes I've accepted. And the reason I've accepted it is because there seems to be more substance to the whole scenario. The names of everybody, the places, who did what, where. There's nothing really unknown about it.
Whereas but a lot of it, sorry, go ahead, finish your thought. My bad.
With these other scenarios, there's just so much that people, they just say, well, I think it must have been something. They must have been going over there the night before to Sebrings to kill them and cut wires, but I'm not sure why, or they were going over there later to pick up something, but I'm not sure what. It's just too open-ended for me.
Right.
I want people to pursue that, though. That's one of the purposes of this live podcast. I want to make it kind of interactive so people can bring in all the theories they want. I want to look at them closely and examine them reasonably. Right. And I'm for the first to invite right here, right now, I'm going to invite people to do that. That's the reason we're doing this. This is not just about us, but about you too, and what you think and what your theories are and what your guesses are. And I want to hear about all that stuff. I want to talk.
You got all of us armchair detectives on the case.
Well, I hope so, because I honestly think that if we look at everything reasonably and carefully, we can come to determination. Now, I've satisfied myself to my own standards of what I think happened, and a lot of other people do believe that, but a lot of other people don't. So I think I got to the point where this was the most complete explanation for me. It's rather simple. The only thing that doesn't make sense to me is it's so stupid. But you talk about thinking rationally. I just had a thought the other day. Why would you park a car at the bottom of the Cielo Drive cul-de-sac, carry your bundle of clothing up, toss it over the fence, go murder 5 people, go back out, take the clothing back, toss them back over the fence, and carry them back down to the car? What's the whole point of carrying them up the hill in the first place?
Right. Do you think that's what they did? You don't think they drove there in their black clothes?
Well, no, they drove there in their black clothes, but they took a change of clothing to change into when they got out of their black clothes.
Right. Yeah. So that I don't think they
carried it up. They carried it up to the house, and then they carried it back to the car. That's kind of like doesn't make sense to me. I mean, are you going to change in the driveway, or if you're going to change in the car, leave them in the car?
Right. Honestly, where I've gotten to with this thing as like for sure things for me, or not for sure, because nothing's for sure, is basically that, most of the timeline in and of itself is a giant gray area for me. Anything that Atkins and them have said, because there was the shots at 4 a.m. There was there were all the screams heard by neighbors, and you could be like, well, that's just someone saying it. But most of the stuff that the killers said is also just people saying stuff.
Well, I don't think it's just somebody saying it. I think they probably heard all those things. I just don't think they're related to the crime.
But that's just speculation, right? That's just because you don't think that.
You have, well, not really, because you have a time frame of about midnight when Mrs. Cott heard the gunshots at the Cielo Drive house. And then you have them at Rudolph Weber's around 1 o'clock. Indisputably, he has their license number. So there's basically about an hour in there for them to have done everything. So why they would be back there at 4:30 in the morning arguing, or why they would be firing off guns at 2:30, I don't know why. To me, that just says, well, it's not connected to the crime.
What do you think about? Well, people have said that Manson said that he went back to the crime scene with people, and also Patricia Krenwinkel had said that the bodies weren't in the same spot as they were when she left, or she didn't recognize the way that the everything was. She said that's different in the trial transcripts, right?
Okay, well but Charlie has also said that he didn't go back. So unfortunately, when it comes to Charlie, he goes back and forth on things, and I'm not, for whatever his motivation, I'm not going to speculate on that now. but
Right.
he said it. Do parole him back. He told me he didn't go back. He told other people he did go back. I don't know what to think about that. I hate to, put him in the same credibility bin as Susan Atkins, but
Right.
there's instances where you kind of have to.
Right.
Charlie was not someone. Boy, I've done so much thinking about that guy lately. There's just no way that he was. I don't think he was, like he said in Nicholas's film. The only person he trusted was himself.
Right.
And the only person he was totally straight with was himself, and it didn't matter.
But he also had self-preservation, right? Like if he would have thought that they were going to lead him right back to him, it wouldn't be a stretch of the imagination for him to, because he was like, he went to deal with the lots of Papa thing himself because Tex had brought it down on his head. He wasn't afraid to do stuff. He was a hard-nosed guy. And so the thing is, and I'm talking to you about all this and we're debating it, whether I could be 100% wrong about everything. Absolutely. And that's what's really neat about this last couple of years, learning about this, is I've been able to really dig in and learn stuff. And I think, and for the record, I think that the love of brother thing was happening simultaneously with everything else. I think, as Manson had said in one of his interviews, and again, going off of listen, take everything any of them say with a grain of salt. He had also said that, somebody went up there to stop the war. Somebody went up there because love a brother. Somebody went up there because of X, Y, and Z. So it seems like it could have been, he seemed like he was good at telling people what they wanted to hear sometimes.
Sure. He said all the time, I just reflect people back at him.
Right. So that being said, then the people that would have said it's just for love of brother, he would have been like, yes, absolutely. And if they had been like, we're gonna go up there and stop the baby, sure, fantastic, you know.
He said in Charlie Rose, he said it was the height of the love that was running.
Right. There's yeah.
And to me, that's the intriguing thing about this whole case. Is to me, but the bottom line on it and the motivation of it is not money or drugs, but the love that those people had for each other. I mean, I've said that in my podcast, and Susan Atkins said you have to have a lot of love in your heart to do this for people. That sounds kind of outrageous when you think about what she's talking about, but when she thinks about doing it for the people she loved, it makes perfect sense. So that's kind of the mistake.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I don't mean to keep cutting you off. There's a little bit of a latency.
No, it's okay. We'll get through it.
Yeah, no. So the thing is, again, with Susan Atkins, she also said it was a drug deal gone bad. So it's kind of, are you picking which one fits? Is that
what exactly source are you getting that from? Because I know in both of her books, he doesn't say that. So it's
the trial transcripts. It was when she went back in there. She said Linda had a problem with them. She got burned for some drugs or something. And so that's where that one came from. There's so many conflicting stories between the transcripts and the police reports and the books. The books are fluff for the most part. I think they're ghost writers and Tex Watson was trying to
the only one that's not is Reflection.
No, Reflection's awesome. It's like the travel book. It's so good.
So little of that. Nothing.
Yeah, and that's wonderful. That's the thing, is it needs to be, I think with anything to do with this, it needs to be independent, because a lot of times if it's anything to do with Hollywood, if it's anything to do with any sort of big business, they're going to push it in the direction that makes them money. Sure. And it's nice that you're able to give somebody a platform to be like, this is what I saw with my own two eyes. This is my story that I lived. And I always say too, the really cool thing about her book is you can follow it on a map, and it puts a lot of stuff into perspective. And that Dennis LeCalandra map that he made on Google Earth, it's like it accompanies that book so well, because you can just put yourself everywhere that she mentions, and which is really cool.
Yeah. So you haven't talked to Mr. Greenwald yet?
Not yet. Nope. We're gonna have to get back to that after I do.
Have you gotten in touch with him or anything, or just?
I've sent one email, and I'm going to send another.
Okay.
I mean, this is all depending on that he's alive. I'm not positive that he's alive.
I didn't want to say that he's probably 80 when he gave that interview to Tom O'Neill, and who knows? He's. If you have an opportunity to, you can also look at a person's character and say, does this person have dementia?
Right.
Was Renato a drunk? There are other aspects to these things that most people don't consider.
Right.
Was
things
he
that
competent? Was he crazy?
Those are all things, I suppose, that like you can't find out unless you know people who knew him. Or something to that effect. Just off of what he said, he's just saying something like anybody else as far as it goes, because there's not too much to push it in the way, other than unless he can give a really good explanation of how he wired up that house and the lights would come on, then that's just garbage, because the electricians I talked to were like, how would that work? It's like there's the three-way switches where, like, if you go downstairs and turn a light on, then when you get to the top of the stairs, you can shut it off, but you can't cut any of those wires and have one of the lights come on. And then as far as me being able to give them the lowest IQ description of that setup, they were like, I just don't know how that would have worked.
Yeah.
Which again throws another story into flux for me, which all of these have been.
That they were cutting all the wires going into the house, and then they cut the wire at the pole, and then they cut the wire right next to the house. I mean, I kind of had visions of Edward Scissorhands being on the premises, going around cutting wires that he could get his scissors hands on. But that would be investigating. Unfortunately, Tom didn't follow up on a lot of his questions or ask precise enough questions. But we'll just have to. If you get in touch with him, that would be great, and then we could hear some more about that.
Yeah, so I'm hoping to. I have his phone numbers as well. So worst comes to worst,
where is he? Do you know?
I'm not sure where he is. Tom said he talked to him in 2016. Okay. And so there's been a few years since then. So fingers crossed.
Okay. He was 26 in 1969. So I can't do the math, but
no. Yeah. I don't have enough fingers, George.
Okay. Yeah. Speaking of cable TV, and I wanted to get back to that because that's you mentioned that they did have cable TV, and I did do some reading on that. And as I tried to say, that the early cable TV was for communities that couldn't get TV reception through an antenna. It wasn't. Right. It was so they would put an antenna up on a mountain or something and run the cable, but that kind of system wouldn't be extant in Los Angeles, because of course you could get whatever TV signals there were then, maybe 3 or 4, but you would need to run a cable to Eastern Drive. You would have to run an incredible amount of infrastructure just to get there. It's not like having a satellite dish on your house. You'd have to have a wire going from wherever the place was all the way up Sunset Boulevard, all the way up Benedict Canyon, and running it back to Eastern Drive. So, and the end of Eastern Drive at that. So that to me is kind of like, there wasn't cable TV. What are you talking about, Paul? Would you clarify? Was it a cable going to an antenna? Maybe they had some antenna somewhere on the property. I don't know.
Maybe, but what I found was it said, when I was reading about the start of cable TV, it had said cable TV systems spread gradually across the rural United States, like you're saying, in the 1950s and 60s. In 1950, there were 70 systems providing 14,000 subscribers. By 1960, there was 640 systems with 650,000 subscribers, and then it boomed. By 1970, they said there was millions.
But still, there was no commercial until HBO in 72. That's my position. And I would also say that if there was a cable TV providing cable service to Jay Sebring's house on August 7th, 1969, it should be fairly easy to find out what that company was. So that's my question. If
Okay.
somebody comes back and says, George, it was the XYZ cable TV company, they were running the Mickey Mouse show in there nonstop, I would say, okay. So I'm waiting to get the answer of that
Cool.
anytime. So
Sure.
and now we're talking about we talked about Charlene McCaffrey. That's an interesting thing. I have to tell you, when you get set on what you think happened, there's a lot of stuff you don't even consider.
Right.
Because you say, well, I think this happened, so why should I even look at that? So a lot of the stuff I've learned doing this podcast is I'm learning a lot more about stuff that I really didn't know anything about.
Right.
And this whole McCaffrey thing is one of them. And you have to speculate on it that she was with Joel Rostow when he was shot in the foot in April 13th. I believe that'd be 10 days before Texas' famous Belladonna photo. So I don't know what kind of contact the police had with her during that incident and what impressions they formed of her and what she's like. She could have been, and I'm just speculating again, she could have been a complete ding-dong receptionist drug addict.
Sure. Or on the other hand, she could have been super reliable, right? Keeping everything together.
Well, whatever happened to her? And here's what
she actually works in Hollywood, and she's done actually really well for herself. She changed her name. Nicholas knows what her name is. He's told me a bit about her, and she's tried to stay off the radar because she still has a life in Hollywood and is pretty decent. I think she's a producer or something like that. Yeah, so she's definitely done well for us. Not saying that like producers in Hollywood aren't like scummy liars too, but that's the product. Have
you ever seen a Manson movie? That'll answer that question.
Oh God, 2 in the last little while, George. They've just put up a cartoon of them on Netflix, as well as they're making a movie called the Resurrection of Charles Manson. It's ridiculous. It's disgusting. Like it's just, he's not even a real person anymore. It's like him and Dracula are the two people that they have on call.
Do you have a trailer for that Resurrection movie yet?
Have I seen it?
No, there is one.
Oh yeah. It's awful. It's terrible, George.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
I kept expecting him to get up at the funeral, but he never did.
No.
So, you talk about you seem to have a problem, and I don't mean to pick on you, but you're the only guy here.
No, sure.
You seem to have a problem with the fact that they picked Rudolph Weber's hose bib as opposed to any of the other hose bibs on Portola. But why? I mean, if they picked somebody else, you wouldn't even have known they were there unless the guy came out and yelled at them. So, I mean, we're kind of lucky that it was Weber's, but I don't understand why his pick couldn't be as random as any of the other ones. You might drive by 2 or 3 of them and say, oh, there's one, or
Oh, sure. Any of the ones on the street wouldn't have made a difference. That's just, it doesn't matter. It still would be close to Sebring's place.
Right.
I think that it's ridiculous they stopped so close to Cielo, and especially if they'd left from Cielo and driven down. I'm so bad with the road names. Driven down Benedict Canyon, then there's still it's just like a quick turn up there. And and so it doesn't, if it was me, I would have, and, thinking as much as you can, like a teenage speed freak or whatever they had going on there. I wouldn't have wanted to pull off a road and stop right there. Like, it doesn't make sense. There were so many turnoffs. There were so many places that you could have gone. You could have gone further up the road, another 5 minutes, another 1 minute. And you could have, it's so close, and it's so close to Jay Sebring's.
Yeah. I think it's hard to a lot of times look at what these people did from our own perspectives, because
sure, of course.
I'm older, much more mature, I've gotten much more experience in life, and you say, well, why would somebody do that? But on the other hand, I have to say, if I had been speeding for about 2 weeks, like Charles Watson says he was, and I had just killed 5 people, I really don't know how logically or clearly I'd be thinking. I might just be on autopilot and saying, pull over anywhere. And that's just, again, speculation. So, I think there is a fact. Have you ever not to get too personal, but have you ever done like a lot of speed?
No, a lot of my friends, well, it was became a big thing when I was in school. I never did it, but
Mhm.
all like most of the people I knew did. Some of them
Mhm.
got eaten alive by it, and some
Mhm.
of them were, some of them got out of it. And so
Mhm.
I've been around that kind of culture. There was also like older guys with lots of young people around, and there was
Mhm.
lots of drugs in there. I was from a real like rural area. Funnily
Mhm.
enough, there's a road called Chatsworth right up the road from me.
Uh-oh. Ooh.
Yeah, I
No,
know.
you know that the road that intersects Waverly Drive at the La Bianca House is St. George Road. Did you know that?
Oh, you do? Oh no, George.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah, we actually went when we went
That's
up there. We saw
that's a
that.
coincidence. No, it is. It's a coincidence, I swear.
Yeah.
I was only 15 in 1969, so
Yeah, that's good. Early bloomer.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, no, I think I just want to speak from some personal experience that when you have done speed, I don't know if you could tell from watching your friends that they were kind of acting irrationally.
Mhm.
Some of them, if you said it ate them up, they must have been pretty into it.
Oh yeah.
But there is an attitude that you get when you're on speed of invincibility and brilliance. It's similar to cocaine if you've ever done
Right.
that. Not that anybody
No.
here has this, but you know,
Yeah. No, I haven't done that
yeah,
either. But again, all my friends, everybody
yes.
just tried to steer me away from it. I guess they thought they'd lose me. Like they
Oh,
knew that I'd be a fucking wreck or something.
you got lost anyway.
Yeah. Look where I ended up.
You're doing well. You're doing well. Yeah. No. Anyway, that is a consideration. I think that one can take your own life's experience into consideration when you're looking at things too.
Hmm. What do you think about the paranoia factor though of those type of drugs? Like people get quite paranoid, especially when they've been binging for a long time, and so that kind of goes again. Why would you stop so close to the place you just killed people if you were paranoid?
I don't know how paranoid they were. I've thought about this, and I have said this in stages with one interview. When they went in there to the house, they were wired and
Hmm.
on a mission. They'd just been Watson had certainly been yelled at mightily by Charles Manson, which I'm sure was an impressive thing to withstand. Uh,
Hmm.
and they got there, and the first one they killed was the kid in the car. And I don't mean to put the victims down as inanimate objects or anything, but they shot
No,
him 4 times. It's pretty easy. I'm sorry.
sure.
Shooting somebody is pretty easy.
Yeah.
But now you're walking towards the house and you're kind of pumped up because I just killed somebody.
Hmm.
Then you go in and all that stuff starts in there and it just escalates. And by the time they get done with Frykowski, they're stabbing him 51 times and all this other stuff. I think that the violence escalated because let's face it, once they shot Stephen Parent, they couldn't say, hey, wait a minute, this isn't a good idea. Let's go. They had to finish it.
Right.
I think that they were probably really excited, if you will, after that. I mean, I can't imagine. There are two things I can't imagine with this case. One is I can't imagine being the victims, and I can't imagine being the killers. Honestly,
Right. Sure.
I just can't see it. It does have time. If you look into amphetamine murders, they're just crazy, crazy.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. That's a good point to hit on, George,
yes.
because they say that this was the most brutal thing going on, but amphetamine murders were no joke. They were happening all over the place.
No, you'll be cut in half in an oil drum in no time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Yeah, we agree on that one for sure.
Mm, yeah. So, I think that is an issue. I hope that some of the people watching can pick up on some of these things we're bringing up and think about them and bring them back to me because they might have some angles to talk about that I haven't considered or you haven't considered. Because, as I said, the
Absolutely.
reason I want to go live with this is to do something interactive, different, and I want to. I was going to originally have some people come in today if I thought, they were good, but the Phantom Wieners on the loose and everything else. So I can't trust anybody to do anything apparently until I set up a bunch of guidelines to screen people who are coming in, because I do want to hear from people who are sincere, but I don't want to
Right.
get somebody in here who's just going to cause trouble because, oh, that's so much fun,
Yeah. Yeah. It's so great.
I get such a kick out of that,
Yeah. One thing that I think it would be a neat thing, and I'm just throwing it out there for you, is because you can see the chat next to you. And sometimes when we would do shows that that people wanted to interact with, you could get people to ask questions off to the side. You can bring them up on on the screen and answer people's questions that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to have to get a little more used to this program. I mean, right now I'm just on the brand thing, so I can put up illustrations. I'm not looking at the chat at all, so I don't know what people are saying in there. I hope they're being pleasant and,
yeah, people are saying, who screened Paul?
What? No, I'm glad you're here because I've been on your show 4 times or so, and I feel comfortable. And you're actually the perfect guest because we were going back and forth about these issues before I did my podcast. I got kind of derailed with Allegra Lansing, but that ballooned way out of control. But so we were talking about this. So when you suggested, and you are getting ready to take a break, so you can segue over to this and maybe continue some of this stuff because I want to. Like I say, I want to discuss this with people. I don't know
for sure
how much time we've been in here. Is there something on here that tells me how much?
Yeah, in the top left-hand corner of the screen here, it says 51 minutes and 28 seconds.
Oh, wow. Not bad. Okay. I was thinking we could go for about an hour tonight, if that's all right. I don't.
That's perfect.
No offense, but, I get on these podcasts and I don't even watch them when it says 3 hours and 22 minutes. I did stay up and watch your show last night. That was very good.
Oh, good. Thank you. Yeah, that was, oh man, that was like juggling chainsaws. It was tough.
Somebody ought to look into that Jackie, I think.
She did. She definitely put her amount in, man. She was
coincidence. That's coincidence.
Yeah. Oh, she got so many tickets. I think she had half the tickets in the raffle.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah, she gave a lot. What's that?
We're over 500, right?
There were over 500, and she had a chunk. She did really good. She was very generous.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, that's why the last one I was like, I'm not even going to be surprised if she gets all 3 of these.
Boy. Well, that kind of explains it. She bought you guys off.
Yeah. Yes, that's right. Easily led.
So you're going to be taking a break for a while here?
Mm-hmm. I'm going to take a little break for a bit and do writing some music again and stuff like that. We've been going straight for 2 years for a couple times a week. And so, the gray hairs are catching up with me.
What's that? You've been doing it twice a week?
Yeah, like twice a week and more sometimes.
It seemed to me like you were doing it every night. I was thinking, Jesus, what are these people talking about? They're good. I'm pretty introverted and succinct. So
yeah, I talk far too much. I just had somewhere to aim.
I'll tell you what you do is you say fucking too much, but that's just my own personal opinion.
I'm sorry. I do swear like a trucker for sure. Okay. It's one of my nasty habits.
Yeah, it kind of detracts from your presentation, but that's a criticism meant with goodwill. So yeah,
thank you. That's all right. I'm working on it for the sake of my 6-year-old.
Oh yeah. They'll copy it. So, well, I did have a list here. We've gone over the cable. Mm-hmm. We've gone over the wire. There's just too many unanswered questions about the wire. Would you be willing to come back and come out of retirement and talk to us after you talk to Mr. Greenwald? Unless you don't, in which case I'll bet. Make a note. Yeah, mm-hmm. It is interesting to say. Of course, I don't believe it has anything to do with anything, but that's my point of view.
Right.
And my point of view, as I said, has given me kind of tunnel vision for years and not even venturing out to look at, well, what about this? What about that? When I started doing my podcast, I really learned more about this case in the last 2 years than I probably knew in all the time before that, as far as details and minutia and things that it just didn't. I mean, it's been fascinating for me too. And I think I talked to you before or somebody about that. I wasn't interested in discussing whether Steve Parent's car had white wall tires or black walls. What difference does it make? But because I believe they're random victims myself. So
right.
So whatever they were doing is irrelevant. Whatever Jay was into is irrelevant. You can follow it. If you can add it all up, that would be great.
Right. Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's one of the things that's really I really appreciate about you is that you're very open to chatting about all this stuff with me,
Mhm.
and you've been doing this a lot longer than me, and so I'm
Mhm.
looking at everything that's there's a overwhelming amount of information out there, and it's nice to be like, oh, check your work. Let's have somebody be keep you in check.
Mhm. Well, you have to check your own work. Like I said, by podcast, you especially have to look at something that you favor. You
Hmm.
know, be as critical with your own theory as you are with the theory that you don't believe, and see if you can find
Absolutely.
a hole in that. I've gone around and around thinking about Charlie and what really motivated him to do this or do that. Uh, uh, it's really an exercise.
Yeah. No
Yeah,
kidding.
yeah.
I agree.
So.
Well,
So
that's
I'm
awesome.
I'm not going to have any other people in tonight. So maybe this first episode will be kind of short. I do want to bring more people in, so I'll talk to you all. If you want to write to me and send any, you can send an email to me at this email address. And with any questions you might have, you can post a question in the comments section of either of the venues this is showing up in. I'm not quite sure. Apparently I'm putting out previews and things and don't even know it, and putting out
Yeah.
messages and not even aware of it.
The
So
first episode was actually 3 seconds.
they didn't tell me. I was playing with it. I'm glad I deleted that. It was pretty bad what you would have seen.
Right.
Hunched over
Yeah.
the screen. What? No, very bad.
Yeah. I'm sure we put a couple of those ones out.
Huh?
I'm sure we put a couple of those ones out in the beginning. I'm no whiz with computers at all. Somebody
Uh,
actually had a good question for you um, on here, and it was, how often are you going to be doing these? Weekly, monthly, or just randomly?
I think I'm going to do them randomly. I'm kind of surprised at how easy it is to set it up. You know,
Right.
I mean, I did the podcast in about 3 different locations. I did one in our trailer when we were camping once. So I'm trying to make it so I can do everything anywhere I am, because I do move around quite a bit. So I don't want to set a schedule and say, and then have to worry about what am I going to talk about this week. I think the subject matter is big enough, and I hope I get enough response from people, and I'm serious people. Tell me everything you think and want to know. If you have any questions about my book or any of the points I've made in my podcast, please let me know. I'll be happy in them. I'll be happy to take them on. And this is a big case, but I don't want to schedule it. I want to wait till
Right.
something comes up that's interesting and that serves the purpose. Because I honestly do think that uh,
Oh, George, you froze.
I did. Okay. I
Oh,
hope
there you are.
everybody's been able to see this. Okay, I hope everybody's been able to see this clearly, and I hope they got my message about getting in touch with me, because I really think that we can work together and look at everything closely and reasonably, without any bullshit or ego, and maybe come to some real consensus about what happened in
Awesome.
69. That's what I'm trying to do. And everybody knows my point of view, so by all means, take me on. Take me on. Read my book, take it apart, take me on.
Awesome. Thank you for
Unreasonable?
having me, George.
Hey,
That's reasonable.
thanks for coming on my first show, and I'm going to try to do this, and we'll see everybody at the next time. I'll try to get the messages out in time and in the appropriate place, and that's what we'll do. And I'll see you all next time. Thanks for coming tonight. This has been the Goodbye Helter Skelter Podcast, the podcast dedicated to the truth about the Tate LaBianca murders, Charles Manson, and more. The views expressed on this program are solely those of the individual speakers, and they do not necessarily represent the thoughts, ideas, or opinions of any other persons, either living or dead. Visit our companion website at www.goodbyehelterskelter.com. There you can find more information about this podcast. Also, check out the Goodbye Helter Skelter Facebook page for information on upcoming programs. And let us know what you think by way of contact@goodbyehelterskelter.com. We will address any comments, questions, or concerns on future installments of the Goodbye Helter Skelter Podcast.